I'm Joanne Pollock with Remark Art Consulting in Guelph, and I'm starting my Inside the Studio series. And I'm very privileged this morning to be here with Cathy Farwell in Globe Studios in Kitchener. Cathy, there are so many adjectives that come to mind when I think about you. And you are an arts advocate, you have been a juror, you have been a speaker, you are a functioning artist. You are so many incredible things, Cathy. And I admire you greatly for what you do and have done for this community. If I could package you up and send you throughout Ontario, Ontario would be a much better place. So we're going to talk this morning, Cathy, about your many hats that you have worn. And I want to start with some of the projects that you've been involved with, like your box project, which was phenomenally successful and very well received in the community. So can you share with us what it was all about?
Sure, Joanne. When I finished my third career training at UW, there was no place in this community to exhibit your work. I had a studio at the old Beamer Box building and had decided to do an exhibition with some colleagues. We decided to mount it in the loading dock of my building, and we built some lovely stands and got a flamenco guitarist in and had lovely food and decided to approach a charity to help us populate the event. And artists came and said, you have to do this for us. You have to make this bigger for us. And the politicians and the people in arts and culture sector came and said, this is like New York. You've got to do this, make this bigger. So I spent a year designing the show. Decided that an individual show was not enough to help an artist, so if you were juried in as a box artist, you were supported for a full year with additional mentoring and opportunities and exhibitions. The things that the artists gained, ironically, were not so much the show and sales, but making connections with other artists. And so many of the other community groups have come out of that initiative. Photo Re, Art District Gallery, a lot of those artists came through the box system. So the box shows, as you mentioned, were wildly successful. We did them for 5 years. Suzanne Luke from Robert Langan Gallery was a consistent juror.
Mm-hmm.
We invited always a gallery owner and an educator to be sure that the jurying was up to date, addressed multiple interests. And then those same 3 people gave each artist an individual appointment of a half an hour, up to half an hour,
Fantastic.
helping them understand what their strengths were, how to exhibit their work in the show. We had an orientation the night before the show opened where we'd all come together, and my husband and I would make pasta for all the artists, and we'd drink wine and we'd talk about how to talk to guests, how to bring them into the conversation, all the basics of business that was not. And then we opened to the community, and it was a weekend event. Friday night was a ticketed reception. Pardon me, that time it was free. You had to beg people to come and offer to feed them and give them wine. Saturday we would always do the history of our venue because we moved around, and we would have everything from actors coming in and portraying that to storytelling to lectures.
Fantastic.
And then the Sunday would be an art talk in the afternoon, and then the show would be open for the public.
So how many artists would you have had at those events?
We started, I'm going to say probably close to 120 over the 5 years.
Phenomenal.
Those were the ones that made it to the show.
Wow.
But a lot of arts education happened for others at the time too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. So from that you moved into ArtsPay. So ArtsPay that's when I first was introduced to you, and in fact when I was in my travels in Guelph, and people would say to me, have you met Cathy Farwell? And I said no, and they said you should. So I met you at the ArtsPay events, and you are just such an incredible motivator and innovator and worker. So tell us about ArtsPay, Cathy, because it's a phenomenal success story.
Well, first of all, it's not me alone. So
I know.
But that is how ArtsPay came to be. So when I left Box, by the time I left Box, I probably had close to 80 volunteers and community supporters. And some of them were big community supporters, such as Perimeter Development Corporation, Createscape Waterloo Region, which was the former JM Dromolani. So I had a lot of really highly professional support system behind me. When Bucks finished, I realized that it really hadn't changed the ecosystem that we live in. We still had people with enormous incomes coming in and asking artists to give them a deal if they bought 2 paintings.
Yep.
And so at that point, I realized that as a venue, it was extremely successful. The last year we sold $78,000 worth of art in about 7.5 hours over the course of the event. We had people lined up to get in the door, and we had red dot runners, people that lived to put dots on the sale. So it was wildly successful, but it ended for a multitude of reasons, and one of them was that I wanted to develop something that addressed the needs on a daily basis. So I spent the next 3 years using that network that I developed during Box to go across the region to consult with anybody directly and indirectly involved with visual arts in the region, and then I designed ArtsPay as a solution. And the mission is to connect visual art practitioners with opportunities, community, and to advocate for fair pay.
It's no small feat to work with a multitude of artists, Cathy, and you're very modest in your accolades because you've been well recognized in the region with significant contributions to the community. So the other issue that I want to talk about, is not an issue, it's a success story, is the Art Incubator project in downtown Waterloo, which I think is phenomenal and which I think could be a prototype for other cities that want to do something like that. So please tell us that.
So based on a number of successes, because everyone likes to hitch their wagon to something successful,
Sure.
We got to about 160 members, and as you had mentioned, high visibility in the region. We were approached by Hip Developments, by Scott Higgins, offering 2 buildings on Regina Street.
That's phenomenal.
To run as nonprofit studios. Well, being a property manager was a new idea for me too at that point, but I decided it was too good to pass up. The 2 buildings have galleries that offered opportunities for shared studio spaces as well as private studio spaces. There were no models for this area, so I did research based on sort of a range of Toronto to London, put together what I thought were fair rent rates to cover everything, and held some open houses. And I had decided in my mind that unless I could have young graduate artists, which is the connection that's missing here, that bridge to help make it easier to stay here and be a successful artist.
Right.
If I couldn't include that in the project, then I wasn't going to go ahead with it. The students came through and said, we love this, but we can't afford $50 right now. We have such enormous debt. So in 2 weeks, I designed what I call an incubator program. And the idea behind was getting sponsorship so those artists could work closely together, develop synergy, collaboration, work together, work isolated. And then part of the program is that they were paid to work with their sponsors, so they had to go back into the community.
What a brilliant idea.
And supposedly the sponsor would help them develop a larger community network.
Brilliant. So there are 5 studios there.
There are 5, so the incubator is inside our Incubate buildings,
Right.
at 56 Regina. There are 2 large rooms and it's shared by 5 recent graduates from universities. We have an application process that we went through earlier in the winter. They've all moved in. Despite COVID, it's been a real challenge to arrange that. They work at their own practice and I mentor and facilitate to their needs. They're given a materials budget to help outfit their space. We have regular meetings. They're required to do an exhibition divided the year, which is the cohort is sponsored for a year. They are each to do an exhibition and a public engagement each term. So we have monthly meetings to facilitate that, and they of course can use the exhibition spaces that are at 52 and 56 Regina. Which
is great. So there is a motivation piece to them being there, and they can't just be there. They have to produce something at the end of the day.
They do. We were only approached with the buildings in February of 2019, and we take occupancy May the 1st. So, like, to do that market research and design a model and get sponsorship and then prepare the buildings for occupation was a major race. And we were actually in the middle of a big show at CG for ArtsPay at that time. So it came together, but the first year was a learning curve, and the first cohort were very generous with their suggestions and patience. This year's program for the cohort is greatly refined. The sponsors, who include the City of Waterloo, also were helpful with information about what worked and didn't work from their perspective, because each artist works with their sponsor to do this, an activity that's mutually beneficial.
Well, Cathy, you are an incredibly generous, and you work hard in the community for oftentimes invisible results. But I dearly respect you, and I do value you as a friend in the community. So thank you very much for spending some time with me this morning. And please enjoy this video. It will be most inspirational for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.